President Xi Jinping will visit Russia next week at the invitation of Vladimir Putin. Concerns about use of foreign lawyers on national security court cases. Chief Executive announces advisory group comprising local and global business leaders. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Both Beijing and Moscow have announced that President Xi Jinping will visit Russia this month. Having accepted the Russian president's invitation, Xi will meet Vladimir Putin in Moscow in a three-day visit starting the 20th of March. Meanwhile, Beijing insists that it will maintain its neutral stance on the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. Timothy Lee tells us more.
During a video conference between Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Xi Jinping last December, Putin invited Xi to visit Moscow, saying the visit would demonstrate to the world the strength of Sino-Russian ties. Today, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said President Xi Jinping will visit Russia from the 20th to 22nd of this month. Wang said Xi's visit to Russia is a trip to symbolize peace, and that the relationship between Beijing and Moscow is built upon the pursuit of multilateralism in international affairs and does not target a third party. The Kremlin also announced the visit today, adding the two leaders will discuss on increasing strategic cooperation and sign a series of bilateral documents. Chinese ambassador to Russia, Zhang Hanhui, said Beijing is planning to establish closer ties with Moscow in the energy sector, as China aims to ensure energy stability and security. On Ukraine, Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Wang Wenbin said China maintains a neutral stance on the conflict and continues to urge constructive dialogue between the warring nations. Earlier, the mainland released a 12-point peace plan for the Ukraine conflict, which calls for a ceasefire between Moscow and Kyiv, as well as peace talks. Beijing had emphasized China's no-limits friendship with Russia and has not condemned Moscow's invasion. Foreign Affairs Minister Chen Gang, who spoke with his Ukrainian counterpart Dmytro Kuleba last Thursday, said he hopes Ukraine and Russia will preserve the possibility of negotiations, adding that no matter how challenging it may be, neither side should give up the chance of solving the conflict through diplomacy. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The government has earlier proposed law amendments to deal with overseas lawyers taking on national security cases. In the Legislative Council today, lawmakers raised concerns over a number of issues concerning national security cases.
The controversy began when the Court of Final Appeal gave the green light for Next Media founder Jimmy Lai to use a British King's Counsel to represent him in a national security case. That prompted the National People's Congress Standing Committee to pass an interpretation of the national security law, which allowed the SAR government to deal with the matter. Authorities then proposed a law amendment under which the chief executive will decide whether overseas lawyers can take part in a case involving national security by giving out a notice of permission. Today, the issue was discussed during a LegCo panel meeting for the first time.
Civil cases may also be affected by this proposal. So the definition of national security is very important. We hope there can be clear guidelines.
Others pushed for a blanket ban on overseas lawyers taking part in cases involving national security.
The national security law is drafted in Chinese. There is no official English version. Just like the basic law, it's not written based on common law. It has traits of one country, two systems. To protect the rights of defendants, doesn't it make more sense to have just local lawyers take part in those cases? And we have important cases where lawyers and even judges not proficient in Chinese took part, and the judges wrote the judgments. They contributed to our jurisprudence and also helped people overseas not proficient in Chinese get a proper understanding of our national security law.
Meanwhile, the government also suggested allowing the authorities to request a new approval from the CE if the situation changes. Will that affect ongoing court cases?
The new proposal will only apply to cases after the legislative amendments. We will not cover cases where ad hoc admission has been granted.
Following the meeting, Paul Lam remained tight-lipped when asked how Jimmy Lai's case should proceed.
The government today announced a list of the 34-member Chief Executive's Council of Advisors. CK Hutchinson Chairman Victor Lee and former EXCO convener Bernard Chan were among those reappointed. Chief Executive John Lee, the chairperson of the council, said the body will provide him with insights into the advantages of Hong Kong's long-term strategic development. Mimosa Ngai reports.
This year, there's one less advisor compared to a similar council of advisors in the previous administration. Almost half of the members were reappointed. The council consists of 3 groups focusing on the economy's development, innovation, and global collaborations. On the economic advancement and sustainability, advisors including Chairman of CK Hutchinson Holdings, Victor Lee, Chairman of the Sino Group, Robert Ng, Chairperson of Schneider Electric, Jean-Pascal Chokwa, and former Chairman of the Wheelock Group, Peter Wu. On innovation and entrepreneurship, many advisors are new, such as the founder of logistics firm Lalamove, Chow Sing-yuk, President of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Nancy Ip, Nobel Economic Prize winner Michael Spence, and co-founder of Alibaba Group, Joseph Choi. Advisors on regional and global collaborations include former EXCO convener Bernard Chan, Chairman of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council Peter Lam, Chairman of the Chinese General Chamber of Commerce Jennifer Choi, and Chairperson of UBS Colin Kelleher. The government said the council is a high-level advisory body to offer counsel to the chief executive. The term of office begins immediately until June 30th in 2025. Speaking on his appointment, Victor Lee said it is an honor that he is given an opportunity to contribute to Hong Kong amidst its post-pandemic recovery, and he will use his company's years of experience in global operations in giving advice. Mingmo Nai, TVB News.
Overseas in the US, a $30 billion lifeline for First Republic Bank hosed down market fears about an imminent banking collapse. Daniel Rell tells us more.
Large US banks injected the funds into the San Francisco-based First Republic Bank on Thursday. This with the lender caught up in a widening crisis triggered by the collapse of 2 other mid-sized US banks over the past week. Some of the biggest US banking names, including JP Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley were involved in the rescue. The deal was put together by top power brokers, including US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, and JP Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, who had discussed the package this week.
I think we certainly need to analyze carefully what happened that triggered these bank failures and re-examine our rules and supervision and make sure that they're appropriate to address the risks that banks face.
The package came less than a day after Swiss bank Credit Suisse clinched an emergency central bank loan of up to $54 billion to shore up its liquidity. Those deals helped restore calm to global markets on Thursday and Friday, following a torrid week for banking stocks. However, while First Republic's stock closed up 10% on news of the rescue, its shares fell 17% in aftermarket trading after the bank said it would suspend its dividend and disclosed its cash position and just how much emergency liquidity it needed. Analysts say authorities appear eager to quickly deal with systemic risks, but worry the potential for a banking crisis is far from over. Data on Thursday showed banks in the United States sought record amounts of emergency liquidity from the Fed in recent days, driving up the size of the central bank's balance sheet after months of contraction. The focus will now move to the Fed's policy decision next week and whether it will stick with its aggressive interest rate hikes as it seeks to get inflation under control. Dan Orell, TVB News.
More details have emerged about the encounter between a Russian fighter jet and a U.S. Air Force surveillance drone over the Black Sea. The Biden administration has released video of the Russian jet dumping fuel on the drone. This report from NBC News.
The dramatic new video showing the midair showdown, all captured by a camera on the unmanned American Reaper drone. You can see the Russian fighter jet approaching the drone from behind, then spraying jet fuel on it. There is no collision, the drone's propeller intact. Then another approach by the Russian jet and more jet fuel. The moment of impact is not shown on the video, but later the drone's propeller visibly damaged after it was struck by the Russian jet. The $32 million drone was then downed in the Black Sea. The U.S. says 2 Russian jets made 19 passes over the drone in international airspace before the collision. The Russian government denies any aggressive action or impact occurred. The Biden administration saying they declassified the video to prove Russia is lying.
Given the reckless and dangerous behavior, and to demonstrate publicly what type of actions the Russians had taken, we felt that it was important to provide this imagery.
The U.S. assesses the actions of the Russian pilots were approved by top Kremlin leaders, according to 3 U.S. officials familiar with the intelligence, though the actual collision appears to be pilot error. Russia insists the drone was in temporary Russian airspace, though the Pentagon today saying the Reaper stayed about 50 miles or more from Russian-occupied Crimea. Tonight, the American drone is on the bottom of the Black Sea. Still no U.S. efforts to recover the wreckage, but the U.S. says the Russians are trying.
We do have indications that Russia is likely making an effort to try to recover MQ-9 debris.
The Pentagon says they were able to remotely erase any sensitive information from the drone in case it ends up in Russian hands.
Still ahead in tonight's news, British government reaches pay deal with healthcare workers, and more countries targeting TikTok. English unions representing healthcare workers have agreed a pay deal with the government. They will advise their workers to accept it in a ballot. The deal is a one-off payment of 2% of their salary, a COVID bonus, and a 5% pay increase next year.
This agreement rightly recognises the fantastic work that our NHS workers like nurses, midwives and paramedics do, whilst also being affordable for the taxpayer and allowing us to deliver on our promises to halve inflation and cut NHS waiting lists. It's a good example of this government getting things done and delivering for the British people.
But teachers and transport staff are still taking regular strike action. Passport office workers will refuse to go to the office for more than a month in a dispute over their pay and conditions. New Zealand lawmakers and people working in the nation's parliament will be banned from using video sharing app TikTok on their government phones. China's foreign ministry slammed the move, saying data security shouldn't become a political tool. Jason Tan reports.
The list of countries and institutions targeting TikTok keeps growing after warnings by the FBI and other agencies that Chinese parent company ByteDance could share TikTok user data with the Chinese government. New Zealand officials today said the ban will apply only to about 500 people in the parliamentary complex, not to all government workers like bans in the US and Britain. Other New Zealand agencies could decide later to impose their own bans.
We don't have a blanket across the public sector approach to this, which happens in other areas.
Meanwhile, British authorities said on Thursday that they are banning TikTok from government mobile phones on security grounds.
This ban applies to government corporate devices within ministerial and non-ministerial departments, but it will not extend to personal devices for government employees or ministers or the general public.
TikTok said it was disappointed with the UK decision and had already begun taking steps to further protect European user data. He said these bans have been based on fundamental misconceptions and driven by wider geopolitics, in which TikTok and its users play no part. China's embassy in London said in a statement that the ban interferes with the normal operations of companies in the UK and will ultimately only harm the UK's own interests. British government departments and ministers have been increasingly using TikTok and other platforms to communicate with voters. Shortly before the ban was announced, Britain's Ministry of Defence posted a video on TikTok showing how the British Army was training Ukrainian forces to use a battle tank. Jason Tan, TVB News.
Back locally, the Hong Kong Tourism Board estimated that more than 25 million tourists will visit the city this year. That's less than half the pre-pandemic annual tally. Over 1 million visitors to Hong Kong were recorded last month. That amounts to an average of 52,000 visitors per day. In a bid to attract more people to come to the city, the government's Hello Hong Kong campaign will distribute 500,000 tickets for flights to the SAR, with a tenth going to local travel agencies. The government said 14,000 of those flight tickets will be reserved for residents. The tickets will be distributed in July. Yaya, a giant panda living in the United States, is returning to China, first to Shanghai, to quarantine for more than a month before going back to Beijing. The health condition of Yaya has attracted widespread attention among the Chinese netizens after this video was released online. It is reported 2 panda breeding experts from the Beijing Municipal Park Management Center are at Memphis Zoo to conduct treatment and nursing on Yaya. The panda will soon return to Shanghai before moving to her new home in Beijing Zoo, which is currently under construction. Japan is pushing ahead with plans to discharge treated nuclear wastewater from Fukushima into the ocean this spring to summer. Tokyo stresses the safety of the treated water, but some Hong Kong lawmakers are worried about the radioactive impact on food products that could be imported to Hong Kong. Jackie Lin reports.
It's been 12 years since the meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, a nuclear disaster with shockwaves still felt today. From spring to summer, the Japanese government is planning to release more than 1 million tons of treated nuclear wastewater from the plant. In a bid to assure Hong Kong consumers, the Japanese consulate in Hong Kong held a press conference explaining how they remove radioactive materials from the wastewater.
What is ALPS treated water?
They say the nuclear water treated by the Advanced Liquid Processing System, or ALPS, will repeatedly be purified, and the ocean water will help dilute it more than 100 times. The amount of radioactive material tritium could also be lowered to 1/7 of the standard for drinking water set by the World Health Organization. Still, the Hong Kong government earlier said it will consider tightening the import of fish and agricultural products imported from prefectures near Fukushima or step up their certification requirements. The Japanese government stresses that food products from Fukushima have been monitored closely by local and international agencies.
科学的根拠に基づかない輸入規制が導入されてしまうことは、一生懸命復興に向けて取り組む地元の方々にとっても大変悲しいことだと思いますし、私たちとしては科学的根拠に基づいて判断してほしいと思っております。
This is a peach juice that former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was captured drinking back in 2017 when it was gifted by a Japanese official. What's special about this is from Fukushima, as written right here. Currently, it's not a must for Japanese food products to label their prefecture of origin when imported to Hong Kong.
And that has prompted concerns from Hong Kong legislators.
Our government needs to guarantee the food safety in Hong Kong. And I think also the people have the right to know and to choose what their food to buy.
She said pregnant women, those planning to get pregnant, or mothers will be particularly concerned, especially with data suggesting the impact of radiation on babies. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.